thinking that you should plug it all in because you know it's just like I was having a conversation with a friend. It's just like mixing. When you start a mix, balance the mix. Don't start by just patching up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, balance the mix, and then add things as you start to add things in. You know, it's like you're going to want to do some bus compression on the drums. That's how you're going to get a modern sounding drum kit. You're going to want to compress the vocal. Start with those things and sort of like build the other things around it. So back to drums, it's like I try to record like I'm on a 16-track recorder. Up until recently, I did all my basic tracking on a 16-track, just try to make decisions. If you're going to use multiple mics on something, don't print 3 or 4 kick drum tracks. It's just delayed decision making that's just going to make your job of mixing harder because you have to sort of manage stuff. If chances are when you're recording, if you have 4 kick drum tracks, you're going to balance them a certain way to sort of be pleased with the kick drum you're hearing. Well, just put that on tape, and just make that decision and move forward. And don't leave all that work for yourself later because you just end up shooting yourself in the foot.
Now, just a couple more minutes on tracking. Are you miking bass cabs? Are you
always?
DI?
I always do both.
Okay.
I always do both. For a long time, I always did this trick where I would delay the DI, 2 or 3 milliseconds to get it, because the DI is getting the signal far ahead of where the sound is actually coming through the cabinet. And, even if you put the mic really close, it still takes, a moment for the sound to develop at the microphone. And that's one of the things that kind of will give you phase issues. So, delaying it back. Now in Pro Tools, I just use, whatever the little delay compensation plug-in thing is. Not delay, there's actually a little plug-in, I don't remember what it's called.
Time adjuster?
Time adjuster, thank you. And just move it back, I kind of do it by ear. You can also measure the waveforms and kind of get a ballpark. You're never going to find, with something like that, you're never going to find, you're never going to look at it and measure it and find the absolute because it's all frequency dependent, where, what you're looking at. But, you can kind of get close by looking at zero crossings.
And let's talk guitars and vocals real quick, especially like with because I know you work with a lot of artists with vocal character. Are you, once again, are you A/B in 20 mics, or do you just know what works on Caleb at this point, or do you know what works?
Well, with Caleb, I've been down that road, so yeah, I do know what works for him. I use a Chandler TG2 mic pre on him, an SM7. This last record, I didn't DS into tape. Only by the night I did, because on Only by the Night there was more effort it put into Caleb singing with clarity. I don't know if any of you know his vocal style at all, but it wasn't until that record that there was a real effort to do that. What else? The compressor. I use an LA2A, and no, I don't EQ his vocal to tape. And when I mix, I use a Neve EQ, a 1073 style EQ on him. I always use a Blue Stripe 1176 that I have, an old one that's amazing.
Well, we can use that as a foray to jump into mixing. Well, there's 2 questions here. First of all, I think, are you tracking, mixing, overdubbing in a big studio like this, or do you do some of the work at home, like mixing, and then?
I do all my mixing at home.
Okay.
I have a little studio in my basement. I used to have a studio in Berry Hill, and I moved it to the basement of my house 4 years ago. I have a lot of great gear. I've been collecting it for a really long time. But it is totally possible to mix not in a big studio. It's hard to record. It's hard to record in a small space like that. But I always go to as nice a facility as I can afford to record, and overdub at something kind of equivalent. With Kings of Leon, there's enough budget, and you don't really want to move the project around a lot. You just kind of want to keep things going.
So did you mix it Blackberry for that, or did you mix that at home?
I mix at home.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything I've done in the last few years, I mix at home.
Wow.
You know, I have an HD rig. I stem things out. I use external summing. I use a lot of analog EQ and compression. All the primary compression that I use, like for vocal or drums, bass, is all analog gear that I have. I use it, I insert it in the session. You know, delay compensation is good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And at this point, everyone's used to the way it sounds. So it's not, you know, 10 years or whatever, whenever, you know, like a record that I think of, Coldplay's Yellow. The drums on that, the reason the drums sound the way they sound is because of the lack of delay compensation. It's the filtery, you know, plug-in sound. It was really cool, you know, and when I first heard that, I was like, gosh, that's wrong. You know, that sounds wrong. That is technically wrong. But you know what? It's cool, and everybody's used to it now. So you can kind of get away with it.
So a couple things too. First of all, you said you track to analog. So are you taking the analog home and then, you know, transferring it to Pro Tools, doing a transfer to Pro Tools, or are you doing that in the studio, then going home and, or do you use Pro Tools? I should ask.
Oh, I use the heck out of Pro Tools. I've had Pro Tools since before it was Pro Tools. I got, you know, a long time ago, there was a program called Studio Vision, and you could get an audio media card and have 4 digital tracks in it. And I've had every version of Pro Tools along the way. And I didn't really believe in it as a mixing platform or plugins for a very, very long time because it wasn't good enough. It's good enough now. Up until last year, I always recorded to analog, basic tracks to analog. But what I would do is I'd have it, once I got it on tape, I'd transfer it to Pro Tools. So I was always listening through Pro Tools. So the output of my tape machine is patched right into Pro Tools, and I'm listening through Pro Tools, doing headphones on Pro Tools, any summing, you know, stems, kind of outputs, doing all that stuff in Pro Tools, because I want to hear the sound of the conversion and what that process is going to be like. But in the last year, because of, you know, tape machines are getting harder and harder to maintain. They get used less and less. You know, younger people like yourselves, you know, don't have as much exposure. It's not, you know, there's nothing, it's not a criticism. It's just, you just don't have the exposure. So, you know, I go to a studio and the assistant has, you know, usually pretty limited knowledge of how to set the tape machine up. You know, if you're interested in it, you try and find the way and spend the time to get a little bit of experience and just sort of have an understanding. There's a lot to it. It is way less perfect than digital, so there's kind of a lot to know so that you can use it well, because you're kind of constantly having to compensate for it. But not to get too sidetracked, I now record to the computer at 96K, and then I take the multi-track back to my studio, and I run it through my console. I have an old Quad 8 console. Put it on tape. I have a 24-track MCI, and so I bounce it off tape back into Pro Tools, and I do some of the EQ to tape that I know I'll be doing in the mix. You know, sort of. So I'm taking a step there and prepping it for the mix, and that's how now I get my analog sound.
It's not. That's 2-inch or?
Yeah, 2-inch, and it's not the same as recording to it, and it's a slightly different sound, but I can get enough of the benefit of it. The reason that I do that is because the quality of tape has gone down. It's like you cannot buy. I have found in the last year or so that I can't buy 6 reels of, you know, RMG or ATR magnetics all at the same time, brand new tape, and put it up, line the machine,